pretty unthinkable about 4 or 5 years ago. The club itself has staged two training camps in Saudi Arabia, played two Saudi Arabia national teams played two matches in Newcastle, using our city as a kind of a billboard to endorse the regime. And although attendances without that were very low, there were still a small number of supporters, local supporters, went to those games wearing their Newcastle United Saudi away kits and they supported Saudi Arabia. More recently, we had the activist Lina Al Haflul came to our city and she reported that local politicians were quite reluctant to meet her. They don't want to even meeting a human rights activist. They're hesitant now because to do that would be perceived as going against the football club in some way. So it's got to the point where you ask, do we still represent Newcastle or do we represent Newcastle to some degree, but Saudi Arabia, well, the Saudi regime rather, to another degree? And I'd say we're kind of caught between the two at the moment. And you have to ask, what have the Saudi state done to induce this level of commitment from local supporters and politicians? It's not really an awful lot, that, in my opinion. The team certainly has improved, but much of nearly all the promised investment hasn't arrived yet. So all they've really done so far is spend £300 million to buy the club in the first place, and then they've made some more money available for players. And in return for that, they now have a compliant and subservient power base in a northern English city. Don't know whether that was the primary aim of making the investment, but they certainly have that now. Now, not everyone here has gone along with this, and there's quite a small number of us who didn't want to help the Saudi state with its propaganda. So some of us no longer go to games, and we can recall that prior to the takeover's completion, a lot of local politicians and well-known local figures said that while they wanted the investment, they'll hold the regime to account over human rights abuses. And in that way, they wouldn't be compromising their ideals and they could accept the money without any, qualms. But we haven't heard very much at all from them since the takeover's completion. So what we aim to do is try and remind these local figures and local politicians to hold the regime to account. So we've held public events, interviews, we've released 3 magazines, which are free to download. We've got a website, and I'd say probably the most significant thing we've done was a protest at a game just before the World Cup took place last year. And in that case, the European Saudi Organization for Human Rights contacted us and asked us if we would highlight the plight of 9 young men who are facing the death penalty for crimes they committed as children. And we were very happy to do that. And before the game, it was a very small protest, but we stood outside the ground holding posters of these young men at risk. And what we found was we got an enormous amount of attention for that because it was happening in a sporting context. It got national newspapers and an incredible amount of national attention, really. And that kind of demonstrates that if supporters want to, they can use these high-profile investments in sport to highlight the abuses, which is obviously the exact opposite of what the regime wanted to achieve. I saw that sort of touched on in one of the earlier talk, and that was quite interesting because I felt that we did accomplish that in that instance.